welcome back to Food Prep Guide. We have been doing several videos lately on homemade alternatives to popular store-bought food items, all in an attempt to just help you make more things homemade so that you don't have to spend that money at the grocery store. We all know how inflation is and the prices at the store. So we're hoping that these recipes and homemade alternatives have been helpful to you. Today's video, we're going to do a roundup of 10 of our favorite homemade pantry staples. We're going to be talking about tomato paste, instant rice, brown sugar, salad dressings, spices, just things that we typically use on a weekly basis that we would normally have to buy at the store if we didn't know how to make them homemade. Now we are going to be going through we're going to show you step by step how to make each of these recipes in this video, but we're going to be moving through them kind of quickly so that, because it's 10 tutorials, 10 recipes, so to avoid making this video like 2 hours long, we move through them pretty quickly. But if you are interested in learning more about a specific recipe and kind of slowing down and going through the steps a little bit more in detail, all of the recipes that we show today in today's video are going to have like full-length videos associated with those, and you can find all of those tutorials down in the description box below of this video. Now, real quick before we dive in, I do need to apologize because I have done a terrible job of letting y'all know that we have printable recipes available on our blog. A lot of you don't even know that we have a website, and that is my fault. I have not done a very good job of communicating that to y'all. But for most of the recipes that we show here on YouTube, we have a printable recipe on the blog where you can just go over there, click a button, and the recipe will print for you. Most of those will be linked in the description box of their respective video. Now, we don't have 100% of the recipes published on the blog quite yet, and that is simply because of time. I can talk faster than I type, and it takes time to get all of those typed up. But if you are interested in a recipe and you go down to the description box of that recipe and you don't see the printable link, please drop me a comment in the comment section and just say, hey, this one's missing the printable recipe, or can I get the recipe for this, or something like that. And that will serve as a reminder that we don't have that published yet, and I need to get on the ball and get rolling on that one. So that way you're not going to be bothering me, you're not going to be bugging us. It just serves as a helpful little reminder that I need to get that done. So that way I'll be grateful for that as well. Okay, let's get started on our top 10 favorite homemade pantry staples.
By the way, if you would like help building your food storage, scroll down to the description box of this video and click this link for our free 1-year food storage plan. We calculated a year's supply of food for one person, then broke that data down into a week-by-week list of items to build your pantry on a budget. We'll send it straight to your inbox. If you're new here, we invite you to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss all of our upcoming food preservation, pantry storage, and gardening tutorials. Now back to the kitchen. The first recipe we're going to make is a homemade mac and cheese sauce. If you have children who love the store-bought mac and cheese, they will love this sauce, and you can customize it to your taste. To start, we're going to start with a basic roux, which is 2 tablespoons of butter mixed with 2 tablespoons of flour. Once that's nice and bubbly, you'll want to add 1 cup of milk. I do recommend whole milk for this because it just makes the cheese sauce a richer, kind of fuller taste to it. At this point, you're going to bring it to a boil until it's kind of bubbling again like this, and that's when you add your cheese. I usually just do a very large handful, but if you want to measure it out, it's about a cup. But again, it's cheese sauce, so make it ever how cheesy you want to make it. At this point, you can season it with salt, pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, anything like that you like. I usually stick to salt and pepper. If I'm putting this in something other than mac and cheese, because this is a great basic sauce for lots of things, I will add in some garlic powder and onion powder. But for mac and cheese, I usually keep it pretty simple with just some salt and pepper. I don't usually measure just a little bit of, I did put garlic powder in this batch. I don't measure, just a little sprinkle, maybe a teaspoon of salt and maybe like a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper, something like that. And the secret ingredient for absolutely delicious homemade mac and cheese sauce is mustard, believe it or not. You can use already prepared mustard. I just do, 1 squirt like this. Again, I don't measure. Or you can use ground mustard. If you're going to be using the ground mustard, you want to use 1 tablespoon of the ground mustard. Otherwise, just give it a good squirt of the already prepared mustard. Once this has basically, you don't have to cook it any more than that. You're just basically thickening it up. It's done. So this made about 1 cup's worth. So you can adjust according to how much of the cheese sauce that you want. This is about 1 cup batch. Next recipe we're going to make is the Lipton onion soup mix recipe. This is going to be like your French onion dip mix-in that you might want to mix into sour cream to make some dip, or doing a French onion soup, mix for a crock pot dish or just some soup. So to start out, we need half a cup of that beef bouillon powder. That is the absolute favorite brand of that beef bouillon. And then we need 1 cup of dried minced onions. And to that, we are going to add our half a tablespoon of pepper. It sounds kind of a lot, but we're making a full pint in this recipe, and we're not a spicy loving family. And this half a tablespoon of pepper, it does not make this a dressing or this soup mix. It doesn't make it spicy at all, but it does add some really needed and really delicious flavor. Next, we're going to do 1 tablespoon of parsley. This is just some dehydrated parsley that I had on hand. It looked like it was about just over a tablespoon, so I just dumped the whole thing in. Y'all, this recipe is very forgiving. Half a tablespoon of salt. I started out doing 1 tablespoon of salt, and it was too spicy. So now I only do half a tablespoon of salt when it comes to this particular recipe. I like to use my Celtic salt, but sometimes I use my pink salt, just whatever kind of salt you have on hand. After that, we're going to add, give it a good stir, and then we're going to add our onion powder, which I almost forgot to add, but just gonna give that a good stir. If you would like to make this in like a large mixing bowl, and then mix it and then pour it into your jar, that's totally fine too. I have a tendency to not mess up any dishes that I don't have to unnecessarily. That's just me. But you just need to be able to stir it. Before you want to stir it, you do want to add 4 tablespoons of onion powder. I just totally forgot when I was filming this. I totally forgot the onion powder, which is kind of ridiculous because this is an onion soup mix. But you can totally add 4 tablespoons of onion powder before you do the mixing. I simply forgot. But one of the reasons why I like mixing it up into a jar like this is because I can simply put the lid on and shake it, and eventually it mixes up well. I do usually start with the fork first, but it mixes up just fine when you put the lid on and give it a good shake. We like to use this as, like I said, like an onion soup dip and mix it into sour cream. If you want to make a chip dip, you'll want to use 1/3 cup of this mixture into 1 16-ounce tub of sour cream, and that's going to give you your onion dip. If you want to make an onion soup mix, or not onion soup mix, but onion soup, then you're going to want to use about half a cup of this seasoning mixture per 2 cups of your soup mix. So if you just want 1 cup of soup, then you would use 1/4 of a cup of this soup mix. And that way you can just use that ratio to make ever how much that you want. The next recipe is brown sugar, and it is one of the easiest things you can make. My sugar container contains 10 cups, so I make up 10 cups at a time, which means I need 10 cups of sugar to start with. When it comes to making brown sugar, it's just a ratio. 1 tablespoon of molasses to 1 cup of sugar. So I make 10 cups of sugar at a time, so I need 10 tablespoons of molasses. I'm sure that converts into something, but I just dip it out with a tablespoon. I need to get that conversion memorized. But you just want to give it a good mix in your stand mixer. You can certainly do this with your hand, of course, if you don't have a stand mixer. A hand mixer would be good, anything like that. I do have to stop it every now and then. That molasses is so sticky, so I have to stop it every now and then and scrape it down just to get it nice and smooth so we don't have a big, massive clump of molasses, because that would be kind of gross in the brown sugar. But that's all it is. 1 tablespoon molasses to 1 cup of sugar. And we love this inside of our cookies, inside of our brownies. If you are someone who likes to home bake, you will be absolutely amazed at the difference in flavor of your home-baked goods when you use homemade brown sugar. Next up is our homemade granola. You can save so much money with this one by making it yourself. First, we need to get some butter melted. We need a half a cup of butter. Go ahead and get that melted on your stovetop. And then if your coconut oil is in a solid state, you'll want to melt that as well, because you need half a cup of melted coconut oil. As you know, if you're someone who stocks coconut oil, at different times of year, sometimes it's liquid, sometimes it's solid. But just go ahead and get that coconut oil melted. It's easy enough to just throw it in there with the butter. So after we get those added to the pot, we're just going to make sure that all of that butter and coconut oil gets melted. We don't need to necessarily bring it to a boil or anything like that. We just need to get it nice and combined and all that, and ready for the spices that we'll be adding in just a minute. But in that big mixing bowl, we can go ahead and add our oats, which is the star of this recipe. You can use whole rolled oats, or you can go ahead and use your instant oats. It really doesn't matter, but you're going to get better, bigger clusters if you use whole rolled oats. But we need 3.5 cups of rolled oats in this recipe. Next, we need 3.5 cups of something similar to Rice Krispies. There are just a puffed rice type product is what we need. 3.5 cups of that. And then we need some sort of chopped nuts. We need 1.5 cups of chopped nuts. Sometimes I do almonds, sometimes I do cashews. It can be really just any kind of thing. And I love this little rotary chopper here. Next, we need to add our sugar. We need 3/4 cup of sugar. And again, you can use any kind of sugar. We love coconut sugar for this recipe. It just gives it a really, really good flavor. But I have used brown sugar successfully in the past as well. Now for our yummy seasonings. This is pumpkin pie spice. I highly recommend this pumpkin pie spice. You can certainly just do cinnamon if you like, but a 1/2 tablespoon of spice is what you want, and then 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and give that all a good mix. You can make this different flavors by tossing in different seasonings, of course, but once all of your dry ingredients are mixed together well, you just add your liquid ingredients on top of that and get everything a good stir. The stirring process at this point is pretty important because the liquid, if you've ever made granola before, you know the liquid is what helps it go from oats to granola. It's also what helps it cluster up and get those good crunchy clusters that we love inside granola, or at least my family does. So the mixing stage is pretty important. Just get it all nice and coated. You do want to have your oven preheated at 250 degrees Fahrenheit. You can go ahead and get that preheating before we even start the ingredients. I just forgot to mention that. But the oven has preheated to 250 degrees Fahrenheit. You want to put this in a clear glass baking dish. You don't want to put this in one of the dark, like non-stick baking dishes or baking pans because they can burn pretty easily. So I do recommend a glass one. And just get that all nice and even. You're going to cook this in the oven for 1 hour and 30 minutes. And every 15 to 30 minutes, you want to go in there and stir it to keep it from burning. So every 15 to 30 minutes, give it a good stir. After 1 hour and 30 minutes total, it should be done. Let it cool completely before adding any mix-ins like cranberries or raisins or chocolate chips or anything like that. Our next recipe is a beef stew seasoning, and the ingredients that I'm about to give you makes up a pint-sized jar of this mixture. We need to start with 1 cup of flour, 3 teaspoons of Italian seasoning, 1 tablespoon of crushed basil, dried basil, 2.5 tablespoons of salt, 1.5 teaspoons of pepper, 2.5 tablespoons of garlic powder, 2.5 tablespoons of paprika, 1 tablespoon of celery seed, and 2.5 tablespoons of onion powder. Now, in the past, I used to add a teaspoon of rosemary, and one time that I made this recipe, I forgot the rosemary, and we all loved the flavor a whole lot more, so I no longer put rosemary in it. But if you're a big fan of rosemary, you might want to test out adding a teaspoon of rosemary to this mixture. After that, just give everything a good stir and load it up into a pint jar. I don't vacuum seal these because we're going to be constantly working through these, but if you want to make up a batch and store it long term, you can certainly vacuum seal to get a longer shelf life. And here's the finished product. It has a very, very slight orangey kind of hue to it at the end. Okay, the next project is instant rice, like your minute rice that you get from the store. This is going to come in handy for really quick side dishes, for your meals in a jar, anytime that you want to rice quickly and don't really want to spend a whole lot of time on it. I like to use my Instant Pot for this, or the pressure cooker for this, and you want equal parts rice and water. So it doesn't matter how much you do, just equal parts rice and water. And then I always add about a teaspoon of salt to my rice, and then I will add, I usually like to add a tablespoon of butter. When I'm dehydrating the minute rice, I don't generally do the butter because that's going to introduce a fatty dairy product into the finished product. So even though I normally add butter to my rice, when I'm making instant rice, I leave it out. After the rice is done cooking, you can cook it on the stovetop. Ever how you cook rice, cook it however you want it. When it's done, put it on your dehydrator trays, and you're going to dehydrate it in your dehydrator at 125 degrees Fahrenheit until it's done. It typically takes at least 8 hours to reach that point of doneness. Excuse me. And then I usually put it in a bowl because it makes it a lot easier to kind of crush up with my fingers as I pour it into a glass jar for storage, because they do have a tendency to clump together pretty bad. But I like to use my mason jar tamper to get down in there and get it all loosened up. And that's just, I mean, mixing it around like this helps to mix it up pretty well. And we will store these on our shelves for future meals in jars and quick side dishes. The next recipe is cream of chicken soup. This is another one that can save you a lot of money. You're going to start with your basic roux just like we did with that mac and cheese sauce earlier. It's just 2 tablespoons of flour and 2 tablespoons of butter. Cook it till it gets nice and bubbly and add your 1 cup of milk. At this point, it starts out just like you did for mac and cheese. But the difference is going to come in how we season it, of course, and it's not going to have cheese. Once you just bring this to a boil, you want to add your seasonings. I use this chicken broth powder. It's my favorite. It's from Orrington Farms, and it doesn't have like the really bad ingredients as the other type of brands do. So it's kind of a cleaner version. And then I always add parsley to my cream of chicken soup. It just adds a wonderful flavor, and it adds some seasonings that make it taste a lot more like the store-bought version. But of course, this one's going to be better because it's homemade, and a lot cleaner ingredients too. But that chicken broth powder and the parsley is all you need. Every now and then I will do my typical go-to for, which is salt, pepper, garlic powder, and onion powder. But it just depends on what it's going into. For your basic store-bought cream of chicken soup, all you really need is that chicken broth powder and some parsley. The recipe that I just gave you makes half a pint, so you can adjust according to how much you need. Then this next recipe is a homemade classic ranch salad dressing. The amounts that I'm going to be giving you makes just over 1 pint of salad dressing. You'll need 1.5 cups of mayonnaise, half a cup of sour cream, a 1/4 cup of milk. I do recommend whole milk, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. You could also do maybe a squirt of lemon to taste, half a teaspoon of garlic powder, half a teaspoon of dill weed. This can be dried or fresh, just depending on what you have on hand. It was out of season, so I'm just using my dried dill weed. If you're using fresh, you would want to use 1 teaspoon of fresh dill weed versus half a teaspoon of dried dill weed. And then you just do salt and pepper to taste, just whatever you like. After that, just blend it up with either a blender or immersion blender and put it up into your jars. This needs to go straight into the refrigerator and enjoyed within 2 weeks. The next recipe is going to be tomato paste. Tomato paste could not be easier to make as long as you have tomato powder on hand. Tomato powder is just dehydrated tomatoes that you then crush into powder form. To reconstitute into tomato paste, you will need 6 tablespoons of tomato powder, or that's just over 1/3 of a cup, and add half a cup of water to that. And then all you got to do is mix it together and you are done. This is going to be the equivalent of one of those really small jars of tomato paste that you can use for like pizza sauces. You can use this to thicken up your soups, your chilies, thicken up some home canned pasta sauce that maybe turned out a little bit more watery than you really wanted it to. You can use this tomato paste for all sorts of things that you would use tomato paste for, but also just as a general overall thickener. I want to show you the consistency of this and show you that it is truly a tomato paste. You can easily turn this into ketchup too, by the way, by mixing your typical ketchup type ingredients, but we don't have a recipe on the blog for that quite yet. Okay, last but not least is going to be homemade taco seasoning. The recipe that I'm going to give you makes about a pint. You'll need half a cup of chili powder, a 1/4 cup of onion powder, 2 tablespoons of ground cumin, 2 tablespoons of garlic powder, 1 tablespoon of paprika, 2 tablespoons of salt, and 1 tablespoon of pepper. Now this taco seasoning is not a very spicy one. You'll notice that we don't have any really spicy ingredients, and even though a tablespoon of pepper sounds like a lot, remember this is a whole pint jar's worth. So if you are someone who really likes your taco seasoning spicy, you will want to add something to that, like some hot chili flakes or something like that to kick up the spice on this one. But our family really doesn't do spicy too much, so this is a wonderful taco seasoning when you want all of those Tex-Mex flavors without it being too terribly spicy. But once all of your ingredients are in the bowl, just give that a good stir. and you can load that straight into your pint jar. Just like our past seasonings, like the beef stew seasoning, I do not vacuum seal this. This sits on top of my stovetop, so I can just grab and go whenever I need it. But again, if you want to make this ahead of time and store it long term, you can absolutely vacuum seal it or pop an oxygen absorber into the jar. Don't forget that all of the full-length tutorials and recipes are in the description box below. We'll see you next time. Bye!